We're going to look this morning and tomorrow morning in the Bible study at the Ten Commandments. And I like to do this because the challenge that we have before us when it comes to what does God say about discipling the nations? What is God saying about government, business, science, education, family, is you have to go back to the law. And as evangelicals, or Protestants in general, we have a very hard time with that because we spend so much time talking about how we're no longer under the law. And it's true, we're not under the law, meaning in both the Old and the New Testament, we aren't saved because we obey the law. We are saved because of the grace of Jesus Christ. And what the law teaches us is it's a good thing Jesus came because otherwise nobody'd be saved. So salvation is an act of God's grace, unmerited grace on our part. However, blessing still comes through the law. So otherwise, it's still, even though you're saved, you shouldn't murder. That's funny. Okay. So it isn't that the law is null and void. It's that the law doesn't save us. But if we are saved and we want to know how to live and how to lead and where God wants our nations to go, we have to go back to the law to understand that because it's taught in the Old Testament. So the 5 books of Moses are the template of how to build a nation. The apologetic is also in there. Why build a nation? Then and Jesus says in Matthew, and it's interesting that it's in the first gospel that the church fathers chose to put first. Jesus says, I've not come to eliminate the law or the prophets. I've come to build on them. So literally, if you're a New Testament Christian, meaning you understand Jesus but you know nothing about the law, you don't understand Jesus at all. So you could begin to think that Jesus is a communist if all you do is read the New Testament. But he isn't. Not at all. So literally, to understand what Jesus is saying in the parables about how to live, you have to go back to Moses because that's his foundation. And then if you want to know what that looks like in application, you go to the prophets or to the kings in the history of Israel. Okay, now when we go back to the law, for some reason, even though we read communion is taken with wine and bread in the middle of a meal, and we have no trouble extracting that and bringing it forward to a plastic cup and a cracker, or to a one chalice and a huge loaf of leavened bread, because the meaning is still there. And it's the meaning we're looking for. It's the values of what does this drink mean? What does this piece of starch mean? When we go to the Old Testament, we lose all ability to do that. So we go, what are we going to do? We're going to go back to stoning someone for committing adultery? Are we going to go back to stoning a rebellious child? Well, I'm not sure that's what that meant anyway, but the answer to that is no, we're not going to go back to that because that was the law applied 4,000 years ago in time and space to a particular people. What is important about the law is the value behind it. So the non-negotiable is not that you have to stone adulterers. The non-negotiable is adultery will destroy a nation. And if you don't understand that and the value behind family, you will self-destruct. The value has nothing to do with stoning. The stoning is to declare how terrible and destructive a sin this is. And of course, by the time we get to David, we're not even out of the Old Testament, and adultery is no longer even illegal, let alone punishable by death. Are you with me? Okay, so I like to do the 10 Commandments because we all think we understand them. We certainly know them, and we think we understand them. And in this exercise, I want to try to drop the 10 Commandments, which we take on the surface. And you can take them on the surface. It does mean literally don't steal, don't murder. But God's point is always why. Why? So otherwise, God is not giving us the law so we can be robots. God is giving us the law as a tangible link to his thinking and his value system. And so God is trying to get us to ask, why? Why would that be so serious? And in the law, it's not what he's trying to get us to do. It's what he's trying to give us as a value system. Okay? So literally, we cannot be blessed in the kingdom of God if we don't apply the values of God to our life. We can be saved. And someone said to me recently, well, isn't salvation enough? I said, not for me, because that's like being born and then staying an infant. The objective of the kingdom is not to be born. The objective of the kingdom is to become a co-heir, to with God, rightly handle truth in all situations, at all times, in all places, to become like him. So if people are satisfied just to be born again, they're satisfied to stay on breast milk, and being a baby is okay, but a 62-year-old baby is a weird sight. And we have a lot of very old babies in the kingdom of God. Okay, so God says move beyond the milk, move into the meat. And the meat is not salvation, heaven and hell, forgiveness of sins. That's the milk. A lot of people go, well, I don't know if I get the hell thing yet. Well, that's the baby food of the kingdom. Paul says that in his letters. The meat is what do we do, how do we live together in a community of believers and non-believers? How do we pursue justice? How do we pursue economic development? How do we pursue, do we pursue education of everyone? What is God's thinking about the kingdom on earth? What is it he wants us to begin bringing before he returns? Okay, so we have to be able to drop it to a values level, which is answering the question, what is God trying to get us to understand? Why this law? Why these 10? Why did God take the time to write them out twice with his own finger in stone? Why were these the only part of the law that went in the Ark of the Covenant? Why 40 days of fasting on the mountain for Moses twice to receive them? And of course the Jews believed that you could sum up the whole of the law in the 10 Commandments. If you wanted to summarize the books of Moses, you could do it in the 10 Commandments. If you wanted to elaborate, but what does God mean by not using his name in vain, then you'd have to go to the whole of the law. Okay, if you wanted to understand what is murder, you'd have to go to the whole of the law. If you wanted to understand what does it mean to covet, you'd have to go to the whole of the law. But if you understood the whole of the law in these 10 commandments, you'd have the basic thinking grid that God is trying to give us. Now, Jesus goes a step further and says you could actually summarize all of that in one sentence. Love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. But what does love mean? Oh, then you have to go back to the Ten Commandments. Yeah, but I don't get enough out of the Ten Commandments. Well, then you have to go back to the law. See, but today we don't do that. Today, as Christians, we take our definition of words and we lay them over Scripture. So we have a definition of love that we got from our culture. Well, God doesn't necessarily agree with that. We have a definition of justice that we got from our culture. Well, God doesn't necessarily agree with that definition of justice. We have a definition of poverty we got from our culture. God doesn't necessarily agree with that. Okay, so until we begin to drop to the values level, we haven't even begun to test our thinking against God's thinking. All we're doing is reading His words. Okay, so this is interactive if you want it to be. It doesn't have to be if you don't want it to be. But remember, I'm on camera and you're not. So we're not going to put your name at the end of the video to show who embarrassed themselves during the Ten Commandments. But the question we're asking, and the question you want to ask when you study the Old Testament, is why is this here? What is God trying to give me? God is not trying to get obedience. Although obedience won't hurt you, it won't necessarily bless you. God is trying to get understanding and agreement. And understanding has to come before agreement. Yes, God, you're right. These are exactly the 10 you should have chosen. Because look at how this all fits together. Okay, so I'm going to take one at a time. And I'm going to give you a chance to tell me why you think it's there. At a values level. So otherwise, what would we be missing if we didn't know there's only one God? Because that's where God starts. There is only one God, and I'm Him. And that's not her in Hebrew. There is only one God, and I am Him. What would you be missing? Where would you be at in your life if you didn't know this? What is God trying to give us in this? Number one, and this one takes up 1/3 of the royal law that Jesus gives us. Love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul. What do you think? Any ideas? Okay, because we're His, He cuts out, there's no one else that owns us, and it cuts out confusion. Okay, but in order to know we're His, you would have had to have jumped several levels of revelation. I mean, it's true, but we don't know that yet. Okay, when the stones come down the mountain, it's just, there's only one God, and I'm Him. Any other thoughts? Yeah? Okay, we might be thinking there are many gods. Because in fact, the whole world believes there are many gods. Everyone around us, the Egyptians we've just been with, the Greeks who were just north of them, everybody thinks there are lots of gods. There's mountain gods and sea gods and plains gods and women gods and God for the cattle and God for the fish and God for the sun and God for the moon. And so this is a startling revelation. And when we come back this afternoon, I'm going to elaborate that this is still startling. But in the time that it is, he is declaring there is only one reality. Reality is not what you think reality is. Reality is what it is. And so God is literally trying to make us real, or give us reality. See, what a terrible thing to go through your entire life, thinking, worshiping, serving something that isn't real. So God is right up front. I'm real. I'm it. And there's not anything else. He doesn't soft package it. He doesn't wrap it in bubble wrap. He doesn't seem to care what you were thinking previously before he wrote this in stone. He just cuts across everybody's cultural values and says, there's only one and I'm it. Now, this is not an ego trip. This is reality. And so if we haven't faced commandment number 1, if we haven't embraced, no, I'm not in the work to convince myself that God exists. God exists. I'm in the work to help others understand the reality of this. You'll be a complex, timid, neurotic follower of Christ. And we have many of those. And probably all of us at some point in our road of discipleship have been that. And probably all of us on a Monday or a Tuesday at some point feel that way again. But he is real and he is it. And this is it. He defines reality. There is no reality beyond this. And if you're a postmodern, I don't even care what country you come from, this just tells you postmodernism has the biggest building block wrong. Reality is not determined by your experience. I don't care what your experience was. Is, will be. God is. And there's only one. And he is who he says he is. Okay, second commandment. Is it idols or name? Okay, yeah, it's idols. Therefore, thou shalt have no idols. Now, that's a funny... I mean, if we've already embraced number 1, okay, God is it, there's only one, then why would we have idols? Well, because we've embraced it at one level, but not at a real level. Okay, so why does God give us this? Why does God, after he has said, I am the only God there is, why does he then say to us that thou shalt have no idols? What is he trying to give us? What would we not understand if he went straight on from I'm God and honor your mother and father? He doesn't. The second step is idolatry. What's God trying to give us? But elaborate. What we have a tendency to do. Elaborate just a little bit. We are what we are like without him. Maybe. You want to try? Maybe. Trusting that he's there, but he's not there in an idol. But I think it goes deeper than that. One more person want to try? Yeah.
God cannot be represented anything lower than...
That's true, but it's not a deeper level of meaning. So what you're adding is fact, and it's not wrong. But it's not a deeper level of meaning. Okay? A deeper level of meaning will go beyond definition to aha. Okay, so what God is trying to give us here is a litmus test for our words. If you want to know, do you believe number one? Then you look at your life and see if there are any idols. Now, if we were in the time of Moses, the idols would have been really easy to spot because there were little statues and, you know, little things they'd make. And we still have that in the world today, but many of us have grown up in cultures where there is no particular idol per se. There's no statue. But there are still idols. Every culture has idols. Every culture has cultural idols. And until they're broken in our life, we carry them. So one of America's idols, because I'm an expert on America, is I have the right to myself. I am the center of the universe. If it doesn't bless me, I don't want to have anything to do with it. See, so I immediately determine whether number one is true based on whether God is blessing me or not. If I'm going through a tough time, then I'm not sure about number one anymore. Why? Because I have an idol. And I'm it. In Brazil, I first gave the message I'm going to give second in Brazil. It might be the sense of harmony and joy and coming together, woo-hoo! And if there's conflict or tension, all of a sudden we go, is God real? See, it's in Switzerland if chaos began. Is God real? Because they have an idol. They have an idol of order. They have an idol of control. The Brazilians have an idol of harmony and getting along and being happy. Everybody's got an idol in their culture. Most of us have multiple idols that we judge God by. We don't allow God to judge. So you wouldn't believe how hard it was for me to give up the right to a car. If you're not American, you don't get it, but we're not alive if we don't have a car. Cars give us life. Cars give us meaning. If you're an Asian, it's probably your family. Family gives me life. Family gives me meaning. If you're an African, it's the tribe. Tribe gives me life. Tribe gives me meaning. Now, there's nothing wrong with cars, families, or tribes, but if they give you life, they're gods. Which means they're an idol. Okay, so number two is literally an opportunity to go, I think number one is true, let me look at my life. And the road of discipleship is a road of knocking over the idols you encounter as you go. Because there are idols you have no idea. I discovered a new idol in the last couple of years. I was speaking in South Africa, and I noticed as I was speaking, I was less and less able to move. And when I quit speaking, I found I was unable to move at all because something had gone terribly wrong in my lower back. So I had to be carried out of the church on a chair. My joke was, I'm glad the pastors are big, and I feel like a Jewish bride. And it was an inflamed hip joint. But I'm getting to that age where I have to go, okay, now, what if I can't walk? Who knew walking could be an idol? See, because you hit that latter part of your life, there are all sorts of things you take for granted. See, so I'm going, but Lord, you can't make me unable to walk. You can't let me get arthritis so bad I can't walk because then are you really God? So I had to come to the point where I said, okay, God, I'll serve you this way. I'll serve you this way. I'll serve you this way. And then I'd like a really snazzy electric chair so I can serve you that way. But walking does not define my value. I can lose it. I don't want to. It's not my first choice. But I can lose it. Okay. Now the third one then. By the way, idols mean you're unreal. And God's trying to make you real. The third one is do not misuse His name. Now, when I grew up in a Baptist church, although I've been everything at some point in time. So, Nazarene, Presbyterian, Pentecostal, you name it, I've been it. We used to have Christian swearing and worldly swearing. So worldly swearing would be using the proper word for the thing. Christian swearing would be to use a sounds like. See? So it would be darn instead of, it would be shoot instead of. And we were taught that that's what the Ten Commandments meant. Ten Commandments meant don't use God's name and don't use these other words. Don't swear. Now, this has nothing to do with swearing. Swearing is impolite culturally. And it's not a good thing to be impolite. I mean, especially if you want to be influential. If you don't care. But it's, you know, the earth isn't shattered when you use the crude word for feces. Now, what's interesting in English is all the swear words come from the German. And if I were German, I would really be quite unhappy about that. See, because those are the only words they have for that. See, but if I said it in French, you wouldn't be offended at all. But if I said it in German, it would be so close to the English swear word, you go, oh, bump in the road. But it's basically rude. It's basically more or less culturally acceptable or unacceptable. You have to have a word for the stuff that comes out of animals' bodies, including human beings, so you'll know what to do with it. But that's not what God's talking about. And God is not talking about non-Christians saying, and you can all fill that in. Because in any language, it always has the same emphasis. No, a non-Christian can't break this commandment any more than they can keep the first two. The commandments are not for non-believers, although they would be blessed to live by them. They won't understand them. Why? Because they don't know there's only one God. So the law is not written to the unbelieving. The law is written to the believing. But we are constantly using it for the unbeliever. See? So what you want to imagine here, I worked in a General Motors factory for 9 months once as a welder on the line, which is the lowest job you can have in the factory. And of course, most of these factory people, well, it was amazing. They could say a whole sentence of swear words with no verb or noun. You know, they'd almost replaced the entire English language. And you had to know they were very bright because, my goodness, how could you possibly communicate with no nouns or verbs? But they could do it. But God wasn't talking about them because they're just lost. See, that would be like me going, oh, Muhammad, Muhammad, Muhammad. See, it just sounds silly. Because I don't believe Muhammad was a divine prophet. I believe he was a man. In some ways, a very astute man. But not divine. Okay, so instead of making a difference, it just sounds silly. It's like mumbo jumbo, and that's what, when the lost use the name of Jesus Christ or God damn, or it's mumbo jumbo. But when we misuse the name of God, is something quite different. So what is God trying to give us in commandment number 3? What will we be missing if we don't get it? What does it mean? Misuse his name. Gosh, once I wiped out all the lost people, it gets really hard, doesn't it? We're so used to reading these for the other guys. Yeah, you want to try? Relate to allegiance. You have to elaborate. Or not. Okay, you want to try? Yeah, but that's the obvious. That's a fact. Drop it to a meaning level. What does respect and reverence mean? Another fact, but you didn't drop it a level. You see, you're still thinking horizontally. Meaning is vertical. You're elaborating horizontally. I want you to drop it a level. Why is it specifically do not misuse our name? How might we do that, and what does it mean when we do that? Yes, but that's again horizontal, an acknowledgement of the reality of the power of God, but what does it mean to misuse it? Okay, like selfish reason or selfish purpose, like to back up your whatever. Okay, to back up, I had a vision of a truck backing up all by itself under the power of God. But to back up whatever you're doing. So otherwise you just toss it into your lingo to add weight to what you're saying. You know, you might say, well, God said this, that, and the other. It might be, that's a motive. I can't test your motive, but I can test your words. Motive is a whole nother level between you and the Holy Spirit. I can tell you what your words indicate to me. Might be your motive. I can't tell you that's what your motive is because I can't know. But I can know that you are using the name of God as though he is a personal valet. And you may even have it as a mantra. So you listen to yourself talk or pray. God, da, 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 Holy Spirit, da, 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 Father, da, 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 Jesus, da, da, Jesus, da, 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 Jesus, da, da, da. He's listening. He's real. He's there. I mean, if you stood around me and said, Landa, 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 I'd just say, excuse me, I got to go to my room. I don't know what your problem is, but you've got one. Because you're talking at me. You're not acknowledging that I'm in the room. Okay? Now, I guarantee you, your prayer life is going to change after this week. Because you're going to start listening to yourself. And how you talk to God. You're going to start listening to yourself and how you talk to other people. And if you throw the name of God around like it's a comma, It's a place to breathe. You are misusing his name. You are acting as though he's not listening. And he is listening. He is real. He is here. He is not deaf. See, but our words and our anxieties reveal whether or not we have idols. And if I've got other things that give me life, I have an idol. See, oh God, I have to be married. Oh God, I have to have a baby. Oh God, I have to go to Mongolia. Oh God, I have to be able to walk. Oh God, I couldn't lose my sight. Idols. All idols. Oh God, I have to be the best student in Hebrew. Idol. It'd be nice if you were. You may or may not be. It doesn't give you life. And then listen to your prayer. Listen to your daily prayer. And know that God says, if you put my name on it, you do it. Even if it wasn't me. Why? Because you are using the real God's name. You invoke God's name. You say, I think God told me to fast for the next 30 days. Then, whether it was God or not, you better do it. Why? Because your words mean nothing if you don't. And it means you don't think God is real. You can say, God told me this, God told me that. And God's going, I did? See, look at God gave me a parking space. Are you sure? I mean, I think he can do that. Not sure he gives you one. You know, what do you think? The parking space, the car will disappear so you can have one? Or the parking lot grows spaces so you can have one? I don't think so. But I think a lot of times God would say, if we would ask him, I'm not going to give you a parking space. I want you to get up 15 minutes earlier. Stop being such a sluggard. Get there on time. But we throw it, oh, God did this. Look what God gave me. Are you sure? Because he's listening. It's just so embarrassing to realize we just toss around his name. I don't have a Jesus sticker on my car. I'm not sure God validates my driving. I would like to drive better. Sometimes I do. I try to not intentionally drive bad, but there's no fish on my car because I don't think God's necessarily fully in charge of my driving. Things go better with Christ. Do you remember that? That's a 60s banner. We took the Coca-Cola. I mean, 60s, plastic, shallow. We couldn't help it. Okay. So if you misuse his name, if you talk about him as though he's not in the room, if you put his name behind whatever it is you're trying to do, whether you really know it is or not, well, I use his name and hope that he gets behind it. Go back to number one. Go back to number one because you don't believe he's real. Okay, now this is about God. Verse 3. Now he shifts to me. And he says, keep my Sabbath holy. Is that right? Is that the... Yeah. 6 days you shall work. This is the longest commandment as far as elaboration. I'm not sure it was all on the stone, but it's elaborated more than any others. Now, all over the world, people tell me what they think this means. Why is this here? Keep my Sabbath. Would you like to take a stab at this? Maybe not? Maybe? Yeah. You want to die today or tomorrow? Just, you know. Pick your violence. When. Explain. Elaborate. Yep. You're partly right. You're partly right. But you added no meaning to the other 6 days. Okay? So he added meaning to the Sabbath, acknowledging I can't do it all. That's right. But he added no meaning to the other 6 days, which are what is emphasized. Yes, work. Now, what is God saying to us? Well, that's a fact. Give me meaning. So the Sabbath is meaningless without the 6 days. Which is really funny, because we always preach on the Sabbath, and we almost never preach on the 6 days. You can't separate the truth, the two. If you don't understand the 6 days, you don't get the Sabbath. Want to try again? Now remember, the first Sabbath is in Genesis, chapter 1. God has worked for 6 days, creating. I wrote at the beginning, I'm in Genesis. I just started today. I just finished Exodus, and now I'm doing Genesis. And I wrote at the top of chapter 1, is this clock beginning before any planets are created, or is this clock beginning when he starts to create life on planet Earth? See, it doesn't actually say that there is absolutely nothing prior to verse 1:1. It just says it was without form. So we don't know if that's the origins of the universe or the origins of a livable planet. It's either one or the other. We can be confident, because what is important to God is not the technicality of how he did it, but that he did it. Okay, so he's worked 6 days, and he takes a Sabbath. He doesn't go to church, although you may, and he doesn't eat a big meal, although you may, and he doesn't take a nap, although you may. So the Sabbath is not church, a big meal, and a nap, or any one of those. Okay, pretty good. So God is not only the God of the Sabbath, where you remember you can't do it by yourself. He's the God of the 6 days, where you remember you were made to create. You were made to work. A workaholic is someone who worships work. God says, don't do that. Don't make work your idol, but do celebrate it. The Sabbath celebrates that, like God, we are here to create a future. We are co-creators. We have co-dominion. We are in his likeness.
I was going to continue Paul's thought.
Yep.
In the sense of that is the base of what means the holiness of work.
That's right. The worship of work, the holiness of work. We are literally here, gifted and created by God to work. Work is not our meaning, but it's our purpose. Now today, in much of evangelicalism, we wish we could go to church every day. Well, this is not biblical thought. This is serving other gods. This is idolatry. See, because God likes to pull up his sleeves and make stuff and do stuff. And his work has purpose. So does yours. You say, no, not mine, because all I do is clean toilets. Well, that God says, I understand that. There's a lot of crap in my business too. Or feces. Or marriage. I say, all I do is dig a ditch. And God says, yeah, that's part of my work too. All I do is pick up after other people's messes. God says, yep, I do a lot of that. Wow. Your work does not dignify you. You dignify your work. If your work dignifies you, you have an idol. Oh my gosh, if I can't be a medical doctor, I have no meaning. If I had to do toilets, I have no meaning. I got, in the gift set, when I went by, however God does that in your DNA or whatever, I got no language ability. Well, I got first language ability, but only. So I studied Spanish, I studied French. I lived in a French-speaking country for 11 years. I learned 60 words. I went to French for 3 months. When I got there, I learned one word, 3 months. I thought, I'm going to be dead before I speak this language. I have no second language ability. I don't think I have the other brain. I think all my brain is the side that first language is on. Okay, well, that was horrendously humiliating to someone that's lived outside of their own culture for over 40 years. If I can't learn this language, who am I? Well, the Swiss agreed. Who are you? And why are you here so long and you still can't speak? And I had to let it go. It was an idol. I was incapable. And I had to go, it doesn't matter to God. I am capable of other things. You say, I don't know what to do. Well, do what's in front of you, because knowing doesn't make you more valuable. Doing is an act of worship. So what's in front of you that needs doing? We get our identity tied to our job, our call, our vision. And if we can't fulfill it, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we begin to feel that we don't have value. Oops. Idol. Go back to number one. People say to me, because I'm writing now. Are we at the hour? A little bit more. Finish the last one. Okay. I'm writing now when I'm home, and then I travel, not quite half the year anymore, but pretty close to that, where all my 40 years in YWAM, I've had line leadership until the last couple of years. So not only am I a little bit older now, thinking about, the walker, I don't have very good focus, which may be my problem with language. I'm dyslexic, and my brain only focuses for so much time. And I have no control over how long it focuses. Okay, it might be 3 or 4 hours, it might be 5 minutes. But if it's not there, it's not there. There's nothing I can do about it. So I get up every morning, I have time in the Word, I go to my computer. I don't even get dressed, because if I get dressed, my brain walks out the door. So I don't even get dressed. I go to my computer and say, okay, all right, God. And you wouldn't believe how devastating it is when there's nothing there, because I have nothing else to do the rest of the day. Well, actually, I do, but I didn't know it was valuable. I can cook. Who knew? I can grow my own herbs. I can go out and work in the garden. I can take my dog for a walk on the beach. But I go, but this is not working. And it's taken me 3 years to adjust to the task at hand doesn't define me. So you can destroy your entire old age if you don't get this. I'm telling you a very valuable truth. See, and writing is awful, because when I am writing, people say, how's it going? Oh, 8 pages today. Oh, 10 pages today. Ooh, good. How many chapters are there? And I said, well, you don't understand. Writing is like digging a ditch. That lovely occupation, ditch digging. And I can say if every chapter is a meter, I can say my ditch is 17 meters long. Well, it's very good if I'm digging in the right direction. But you see, when you're writing, you're creating, and you're not creating if you already know where you're going. So my best days may be digging a ditch that I'll never use. Yeah. Then again, it might not. But if I put any value in my ability to recognize the value of my task, I am hopelessly miserable. I have to put my value in the fact that I ennoble the task. See, so washing people's feet doesn't make me valuable. That I wash your feet is what has value. It's that Jesus washed their feet. It's not that he washed their feet. It's that he washed their feet. You can't have added value. You get all the value in number one. God is real, and you are made in his image and his likeness. And if you think you need added value, you have an idol. But it is also, this commandment is a declaration of the right to work. Not just the responsibility to work, the right to work. We were made to work. There's nothing more destructive to the human soul and spirit than thinking you have nothing to contribute. Than being told you cannot contribute. There's nothing you can do. And aid as a development strategy never works because it says you're helpless. It might keep you from dying, and it's a good thing. Aid is in the Bible, but it's not a development strategy because giveaway programs diminish people's sense of their ability to do something. It is fundamentally flawed at a values level. A culture that does not pay you enough to live on by the work of your hands, if you work 6 days, 8 to 12 hours, and you can't earn enough to eat and have a home, that is an immoral economy. Because every human being's labor is worth them being able to live, which means they can eat, they can have a cover over their heads, they can get medical attention, they can send their kids to school. Work in and of itself is worship, and there is no more undeveloped country than those countries that no longer understand work is what we're made for. Now, that's not particularly an Asian problem, but it is on my continent, because in Africa, they feel to work makes them act like a slave. And it is actually their God-likeness. But it's very difficult for them to get that because of colonialism. They can get it, but it's hard. So the Sabbath is a celebration, a time to stop and look at what you did the first 6 days. It's not a fleeing from the world of work. It's a meditation on it. It's looking at what you have made, what you have done, what you have accomplished. And you say, well, I didn't accomplish anything. Yes, you did, because you were alive. It's celebrating, you know, the home that you have. It's celebrating the children that you have, the food that you have. You know, YWAMers say to me all the time, well, I don't really have that much money. And I say, but did you eat every day this year? Yes. Then God provided for you. It may not have been through salary, but if I added up how much food I have been given in the last 40 years, how much housing I have been given in the last 40 years, I mean, it has to be millions. Half my 40 years is spent living in someone else's home, eating someone else's food. Do you know how much money that is? And I work for it. It just doesn't come in the form of a salary. Okay? So it's taking time and it's saying, God, look at what we did together. And preparing yourself to be excited about God and you in the next week. It has nothing to do with the meaningfulness of the labor that you're doing. Okay, number 5. Thou shalt honor your mother and father. Now these two, Sabbath and mother and father, I think are we go the most religious on these two. And I don't mean that as a compliment. Okay, so honor your mother and father. What do you think? I know you're all thinking of the religious answers. I'm not going to say that because that's what she's thinking of. Okay? If God is real, I shouldn't have idols. If God is real, I shouldn't misuse his name. He's here and he's listening. If God is real, I have value, my work has value. And it is right to spend time celebrating the God who created me and the God who created the work, the God who gave me value. Honor your mother and father. Now, in many ways, this is like the first 3. The first one is tested by the next 2. Okay? Consider this the first one as he turns his attention to us. This, the first one, the Sabbath. And this, the one that tests it. Can you do it? Can you drop it a level? Go ahead and hurt yourself. That is true, but that has nothing to do with this. It's true, we have relationship with God, and so we should value that. But this is very specific. He could have said, have good relationships with all people. But he didn't. He said, honor your mother and father. Very select.
Another reminder that you're created, that what you have is not by yourself, it's come from somewhere, and that you've been created by your mother and father, and honoring them.
You're very close. You're halfway there. You're halfway there. You came from somewhere. You have value. You came from somewhere. You're close, but you haven't nailed it yet, because when you nail it, we'll all gasp. Yeah, well, you're actually doing better than most, so.
I think that it's to honor my mother and father is basically to honor God himself, in the sense that God created human beings, so eventually he created my mother and my father.
But now remember, he's trying to give you something. He's trying to give you something. Something you don't have if you don't understand this commandment. He's not trying to get you to do something. He's trying to give you something. What is he trying to give you? That's the meaning level. So you're not wrong. You're just not right. You're not answering the question I'm asking. Every person that's in a gang on a street anywhere in the world knows the meaning of this. What? Well, you may or may not belong, Your parents may be awful. They may have thrown you out when you were born. God is not in La La Land. He's not going, and all your parents will be wonderful, and you will honor them, and you will obey them. You can't obey your parents. You have to obey God. And God says you will eventually have to disobey your parents. Hopefully not all the time, but sometime. So this is not obedience. Okay, here it is. You ready? If God is real, and I am created in His image, then my life has value. My work has value. My life has value. I am linked with God. If I cannot honor the source of my life, not because of how they act or what they do, but simply because they are my source, I cannot value myself. So on the street, in the gangs, in the rough people's lives, you know, they will always have a name for you. The worst name they will call you will include your mother. Always. What they call your mother will be different from culture to culture. In one culture it'll be a whore, in another culture it'll be a pig, in another culture it'll be a dog, depending on whatever that culture considers to be the lowest of low of all things. And isn't it funny that they curse us by cursing our mother? But everybody knows this. It's the worst curse you can say to someone on the street, because if your parents have no value, neither do you, and they are your source. So my illustration that I love is Mr. Zidane, the soccer player in the World Cup between France and Italy. It's his last game. He's retiring. This is the World Cup where we're all going to be nice to each other and not have racial slurs and cultural, nastiness. So we walk out and take a pledge, holding the hand of a child. It's all so touching. And it's very heated in Zidane, and this Italian guy are going for it. And you can feel the whole world's glued to it. And then all of a sudden, Zidane stops. And he takes 2 steps away. You can almost hear him thinking, cool down, cool down. And then he turns around and he walks back to the guy and he goes, poof, and headbutts him to the ground. You know what the guy had said? Your mother is a Muslim whore. And he took 2 steps and he said, not my mother. I applauded. It's not the best role model for football. But I'm glad Zidane has enough self-respect. I have respect for his mother. You see, the value of your parents is not the condition of your birth. You may be sperm in a test tube. You may be a surrogate, an egg in a surrogate mother. You may be the byproduct of rape. You may be, your mother may be Jezebel and your father, whoever is the worst person, Attila the Hun. They may be the worst people that ever lived. But they did one good thing. They gave you life. You say, I don't even know who they are. You don't have to. But whoever they are, they did one good thing. They gave you life. And your life has value. Why? Because your parents were nice? No, because life is created by God. But He will use somebody's egg and somebody's sperm. And if you cannot acknowledge that your parents at least did one good thing, then you do not love yourself. And if you do not love yourself, you do not believe God is real and that your life has value. See, there are people all over the world fighting for the right to life while despising their own. See, when in Cambodia, when things were so difficult many decades ago, some of the women that would come into the camps have been raped 30, 40, 50 times. And our young Christians working in the camp just didn't know how to encourage them, because they said, man, if that had happened to me, I'd want to kill myself. That's right, because you think your life is valuable because it feels good. You think your life is valuable because you never suffered. Your life is valuable no matter what is going on, no matter what will happen. The determination of our value is not our circumstances. The determination of our value is God real? And if God is real, your work has value no matter what it is. And if God is real, your life has value, no matter how you got it. And if your life has value, that egg and that sperm, no matter what name, or personality, or class, or color, or action. And you can't be pro-life and anti-yourself. You can't convince the world a fetus should live while wishing you could die. And if you can't accept that, you have to go back to number one. You don't believe God is real. You have an idol. If I'd had these kind of parents, I'd have had value. No, you wouldn't have. If I'd come from this culture, I would have value. If I hadn't been thrown away when I was 2 weeks old, I'd have had, no, you got an idol. You got an idol. You want a different history, so you will have value. And honey, you've got value because you're created in the image of God. And we all get the history we got. And until we're 12, 13, most of it's given to us. Very little of it is created by us. After that, okay, so that's the first 5. We'll leave it there. We'll come back to the last 5 tomorrow morning.